Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Do any of you have any experience with precognition? I think I've had that happen to me. Over the years, I've had these visions. They weren't really dreams, but these images you sometimes see just before you fall asleep, or when you're really tired and start to kind of daydream. I've had times throughout my life, IDK when it started, but I had them as a child, when I saw a picture of something mundane, and then sometime later I'd see that exact same view in real life, awake. For a very long time, I haven't given it much thought, but a couple years ago I started to wonder if there are other people who also had that. A bit of Googling and I discovered it's called precognition, and apparently many people seem to experience this. So I'd like to open a discussion about it. If you've had this happen to you, describe it, and feel free to give your thoughts, feelings, theories, whatever. Here's my experience. For me, it's not very frequent, maybe 2 to 4 times a year on average. It's exclusively visual, never having any sound, just as if I took a picture with my eyes of what I saw and sent it back in my mind to the past. I can distinguish it from a regular daydream because it's just a single picture that just pops up in my head, and I always get a certain specific feeling when it happens, like a mix of confusion, kind of a surprise, and something subtle I can't describe. When I see that picture later on, it always hits me, and I remember exactly the moment I had that vision. It's never helped me in any way or anything. It's kind of just a weird thing I have that I don't control. It's very random. The pictures themselves are pretty mundane. I mean, for example, I had visions that were just my kitchen from a certain strange angle, or tire tracks on the ground somewhere. I didn't recognize it at first, but I did later, when I was coming home from school one day with my head down, staring at the ground. Feels like a glitch in the matrix, like an unimportant memory I shouldn't have yet.
Maybe, but only in dreams. I used to have déjà vu very often, once a week, but don't have for like months. I think my dreams, most of which I have a blurry vision of remembering or not remembering at all, are somehow related to events I experienced twice, déjà vu. It's hard to explain. In my mind, I have it easier to do this than to explain with words.
I think some level of precognition is possible if parallel universes are actually a thing, and the quantum state is shared, and the order of executions of these universes is not guaranteed. The most likely cause of precognition is neurons tied to the same things being solicited as they resonate. Of course, I'm building this theory under many levels of assumptions, but it would explain why people can only process things through their memorized experiences. BTW, about those dreamed people seen in the morning, you might have seen them and subconsciously stored their appearance for the dream to dig it up later. That said, your dream was probably just a dream. Worst you can get these days is a flood. Don't know why some people seem to be more prone to precognition. Could be a steady mind or something like that facilitating such resonances. Of course, I might be just spewing bull. Who knows?
So does anybody have a good explanation of déjà vu, a study on dreams foretelling reality, or whatever this is that just happened? I think I got from somewhere that this is actually a common experience that happens to some people, and I was really intrigued by it throughout the entire day. I had nothing to do this morning, so upon waking up I decided to just go back to sleep after writing in my dream journal from the night before. For my second dream, after falling back asleep, I distinctly dreamed of my friend, who I haven't talked to for a couple of months, talking about disrespecting women as it's part of his heritage or whatever to do so. In response, I talked back and shoved him, to which I walked away to a bus stop, I believe. The rest of the dream didn't really matter. I woke up to a phone call from him, asking to go see a movie. On arrival, he told me about how he made out with this girl I've been secretly admiring for a while, which got me a bit in the dumps today. Though jealous, I'm happy for him and I wish he treats her kindly. Point is, was there some sort of correlation between the dream and what happened in reality, or is my head just on something? I'm super curious for an explanation.
The way I see it, instead of us moving through time, it's the other way round. Time moves through us. There's no future, there's no past, it's always now. Tomorrow never gets here because it doesn't exist, it's just now. The times when we experience déjà vu, I think, are when there's a glitch in the free flow. It's really difficult for me to explain it, I might have to come back after I've slept and can do justice to my theory.
My mom has dreams of the future. I still don't know if I actually believe it or not, but it's been scarily accurate a few times. She had a dream one time that a friend of my dad's was lying in a coffin dead, and she told us about it. A few days later, he was killed in a traffic accident. About a year ago, she dreamt that my cousin was standing in an empty baby's room crying. A few months later, my cousin revealed she was pregnant, and just a few months ago she had a miscarriage. There has been more, like seeing her dad fall on ice and break his hip, which he ultimately did and led to his death not long after. The fact she tells us about the dreams when she has them before they happen increases the credibility to me, otherwise I would just say she only thinks she had those dreams.
This kind of reminds me of my grandma. She never said too much, but my mom told me stories. Very similar to yours. Things like people being sick, having an accident. The one story that stuck with me is she woke up one night at 1 a.m. really worried. Told my granddad that something bad had just happened to their oldest son and she could see the color red. Granddad was like, "Nah, just a bad dream," but Nan wouldn't have it. All she could say was red blood. She wanted Granddad to call her son's wife to check what happened, but he said no, he wasn't going to phone and wake everyone up at this hour. A couple minutes later the phone rang anyway. Their daughter-in-law said the police were there. Her husband had been involved in a hit and run when he was walking home drunk from the pub. Was in hospital with lots of injuries. He ended up surviving, but had a bad brain injury. Gran asked at the hospital about the blood, that she saw lots of red. Nurses said there was not much blood at all when he came in, it was all internal injuries. Nan thought the nurse was lying and wouldn't believe her. Turns out a couple weeks later they finally tracked down the vehicle that hit him. It was red. Not only that, the chick driving was a red freak. Always wore red clothes, accessories, and shoes. Nan was like,
"Yep, that's the bitch."
It's probably the only spiritual thing to have happened to me, although I think using that term to describe it would be jumping the gun. Usually the instances are half a second or so of completely trivial events, but I've had one experience that was pretty important. The woman who taught me guitar passed away a few years ago. Off the top of my head, I'd say about 3. This was near the end of a school year, and I had a concert to perform on the same day. Oddly enough, this woman was very connected to music. Furthermore, her life had just started to improve after bouts with illness, both chronic and short-term. Somehow, during the concert, I forgot all about her death. I feel like an asshat for saying that, but it is the truth. So I go to McDonald's afterward, and while I'm standing in line, I remember that someone has died that day, but not who it had been. I cycled through a few names in my head, discarding each, and then it dawned on me who the individual was, and I realized that I had experienced that moment before in a dream. Recently, I've been pondering this experience again for some reason. Earlier today, I had another mundane flash of the phenomenon. Overall, I would say the most consistent aspect is the familiarity of my thoughts and the sensory data I am receiving at the time. The most interesting thing to me is how the mind, if indeed the mind is involved, has the potential to receive glimpses of the future.
Anyone else get this? Say you're sitting there doing something specific, and you suddenly distinctly remember dreaming your actions before they happened. Every time this happens, you'll do exactly as you did in the dream, unable to choose a different outcome. When this happens, I'll know what is going to happen next, even if it involves other people. First time this happened was in middle school, when I was playing football with some of my friends. I just looked at them kicking the ball and knew exactly where the ball would go and who would kick the ball, based on a dream I had dreamt. Sometimes I'll even experiment with the feeling, only to realize that this experiment too was in the dream. It's not déjà vu, which is just your neurons being dumb and sending the same signal twice. There can't possibly be a scientific explanation for dream memory precognition. Or there is, but it lies in a scientific abstraction.
I've experienced this sensation since I was a kid. It first happened when I was 4 years old and I freaked out. Had mental premonitions on and off since then. I definitely see where you're coming from with the experimentation. I used to do the same. For instance, one time I was sitting at my desk solving some math problems in high school when I felt the sensation coming on. While working through a calculus question, I knew exactly what I was going to write before I had even solved the problem. It felt like I was watching a movie play out before my eyes. I tried to break the loop by turning around and jumping out of my chair at full throttle. Nothing changed. I realized what I had done had been predetermined in my dream several months earlier. It felt completely hopeless. These experiences of ours suggest that the universe works in a fatalistic way. Nature is seemingly spontaneous, or perhaps too complex to predict with such an amalgamation of variables working to shape the future. Yet with these premonitions, things always turn out as predicted. Maybe the creator of the universe ordained it in such a way that it would have the appearance of spontaneity, but would invariably turn out the same every time. Our brief and rare premonitions into the future may be an unintentional glitch in the simulation. Maybe sentient life forms on other planets experience the same sensation, and we are all connected to a universe-spanning sentient engine that leaks knowledge of the future in short and sporadic intervals to select individuals. As you say, the solution to this mystery must certainly lie in scientific abstraction. I have no idea how we can examine or experiment on these sensations, but they are certainly real.
I can't explain it, but my entire life I've had these moments where on the rare occasions I dream I have moments where I'll imagine a scenario where I'll be doing something and I'll be fully aware. I can clearly hear what I'm thinking at the time, what I'm feeling, and remember clearly what I am seeing. I'll think nothing of it for sometimes months at a time, and then the exact thing in my dreams comes to pass. It would almost feel like deja vu, but it's not just a feeling like this has happened before. It's more like the event happens and I will immediately remember the dream, or I will be doing something and I'll start to notice the similarities of that dream I remember having, and I'll immediately do the events of the dream fully aware I am doing the exact events. Example, be around 12. Have a weird dream about a dog, one of which we don't have in our house. Thinking to myself, why is this dog digging under the couch? This feels familiar somehow. My back hurts. I don't want to bend over to get it. I'll just put my foot under there to pull whatever it is she's getting out from under there. Oh great, it's a goddamn can she's been chewing on. In the car telling my mother I had a dream this would happen and start to freak out. Wake up because I realize I'm dreaming. Few months pass and we get this white dog. At the time don't remember it's the same white dog. A few weeks have passed and this dog is doing something in the living room and I hear loud clicking noises. What is that dog doing? Get up and go see what's happening. Why is that dog digging under the couch? This seems familiar somehow. It's a weird experience that keeps happening far more frequently the older I get. Never being able to utilize it, as once I realize it's happening, the events play out exactly as my dream, and it usually happens so far apart that I can't predict that it's happening. For instance, the moment that happened not too long ago was just something so mundane, yet realizing it happened bothers me. I was making some lame joke on another board and got that same feeling and remembered I was about to be scared of something, and as I'm thinking about it, my GF, who sleeps behind me on the bed where my desk is, grabbed my shoulder getting out of bed. I had a dream where that exact same thing happened when I took a nap like 3 weeks ago or something. Exact same thing. Woke up that day wondering what I was scared about, like I just remembered it spooking the shit out of me and waking me up. Then the exact same situation. It's weird. As for details, it's crystal clear. I mean, in the dreams I can tell you exactly what is happening down to how itchy my back is in the moment of my dream. Yet like clockwork, it's always without any context. I'll be wondering why in the dream I'm feeling a certain way and boom, something happens and I wake up before finding out what it is. And like clockwork, not too long after that exact situation plays out. The only thing I can compare it to is like Final Destination, where that girl sees a vision of the roller coaster crashing or whatever happens in that movie and then waking up back in the present, yet far less severe in this case and certainly not so close together.
I had something highly strange occur in 2015. Another incident in a lifetime of inexplicable experiences, and I would appreciate any thoughts that you might share with me concerning this event. I read the obituaries in my local newspaper occasionally, as I sometimes worry that one of my old friends' parents or someone I have known has passed on, and I would want to express condolences. My own parents died suddenly, very close together, and I know how important that expressions of sympathy can be. This concerns an obituary that I read last summer. I noticed it because the woman was a prominent lady who was a high school friend of my mother's, and also the mother-in-law of my son's cousin. She had died of cancer, and it was doubly sad because her granddaughter was going to be the queen of our local Rose Festival the following October. This is a great honor in our city, and the woman herself had actually been a Rose Queen in 1955. Her granddaughter is the daughter of my son's cousin James. So my son and I discussed the news at length. He was getting married in November of that year and was inviting members of that family to his wedding. So I actually shared the news of her death with a few people and remember that well. Imagine my surprise when I read the local obituaries in June 2017 and saw that she had died recently. The story of her death was prominently featured, and I read it in disbelief and utter shock again and again. I called my son and he was confused as well, as I had already reported her passing to him 2 years previous. What can this mean? Did I have visual precognition of her death 2 years before it occurred? Did I experience a time slip, going into the future to read her obituary? Or did time curve back on itself and confuse me with a double death? This event has truly been worrisome to me. Am I losing my mind and memory? The week before Memorial Day in 2017, I had the random thought that a distant great aunt of mine had passed and called several relatives to inquire about it. No, she was not dead, but no one knew anything about her situation if she had been ill. Was living with her daughter. She was 92. But 8 days later, Elle got the news that she had actually died 6 days after my phone call.
I never thought precog or ESP was real until a few months back. I've been having these really weird emotional dreams with a girl I once fancied. One day I woke up absolutely livid for some reason. I couldn't quite remember the dream, but it involved her, and when I awoke all I wanted to do was punch the wall beside me. Turns out later that day, she had found someone else better than me, and that she didn't want contact anymore. I got really screwed up and remember the dream. That feeling was exactly what I had. Another time, a couple weeks later, it was another dream about her. But I can definitely remember this one since it was so vivid. It was me and her walking around an old, abandoned Victorian township. Looked a lot like my hometown. Occasionally bumping into each other, I would try to strike up a conversation, but it was always really short and frantic. A few more times after I meet with her and try to talk, but we just end up parting ways, lass, if we were really busy. We see each other at an entrance to an old antiques warehouse we were just wandering in. We actually had this back home. I talk again, but she cuts me off and says, "I really have to go, this isn't a good idea," and walks off down the street. And I follow for a while until I realize the futility of it and give up. When I wake up, the same thing happens when I try to text her. Short, frantic conversations, then she just doesn't reply. I text a few more times with little to no effort in her replies. I've given up since then. I still dream of her from time to time, but it's never anything pleasant nowadays.
I'm literally a Synchronicities Magnet to the point that it's scary. I haven't figured out the mechanism yet, since it happens with small things as well as with big things. At this point, it's either A, some form of precognition. I doubt this because I seem to cause it. A recent example would be me thinking randomly about some obscure game from like 10 years ago, but can't remember what it was called. Become obsessed about remembering its name for a few hours, but eventually give up because I know it's impossible since I didn't even play it or give a damn about it. Just saw some gameplay once and found it cool. Next day, a random YouTube video from a few years ago pops up on my feed about that game. This is just a stupid and simple example that happened recently. Had things happen much more important than this, but it always seems that it goes, cause me leads to the effect, the thing happening. Hence, I don't think it's precognition, unless we're talking about some retro-causality feedback loop or something. B, spirit guides, guiding me towards something. Doesn't explain why it would happen with absolute stupid things like some random video game. Would expect it to happen for more important things, which it does. But the fact that it happens for random dumb events makes me skeptical. C, literally demons or interdimensional entities screwing with me for some reason. This is the main reason why I began to tone it down. I noticed that it happens when I become obsessed with something. So now I'm very picky with what I choose to focus my mind on, because I don't know if there is a price attached to all these happenings. D, consciousness manifests reality, and that's it.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.